This is the Mike Fernandez Global Business Leadership Series at your Miami-Dade College. I'm Juan Mendieta, the Director of Communications at Miami-Dade College, and on behalf of our more than 150,000 students, welcome to this college, a very special place we affectionately call Democracy's College, because it gives everyone with the desire to learn and improve their lives the opportunity to access quality higher education. This morning, we're extremely proud to once again present the very latest installment of the acclaimed and popular Mike Fernandez Global Business Leadership Series. Our speaker is Mr. Carlo Enrico, the President of Mastercard for Latin America and the Caribbean. Mr. Enrico will be formally introduced in just a moment by my colleague John Wensveen, the Miami-Dade College Vice Provost for Academic Schools, who will also lead today's conversation right here at MDC's renowned entrepreneurial training hub, the Idea Center. And Romy Batia, thanks again for hosting us always and for rolling out the welcoming mat. Before that, I once again want to thank the amazing community benefactor and leader of this series, Mr. Mike Fernandez, who's a regular visitor to the college and whose name graces our renowned School of Business. It's Mike's support over the last 2+ years of this series that has allowed us to bring to our students and the community Dr. Bernard Meyerson, Chief Innovation Officer at IBM, Mr. Laxman Narasimhan, President for PepsiCo Latin America, former U.S. Ambassador Donna Reinach, the VP at Boeing, Mr. Eduardo Cuello, the Regional President for Latin America and the Caribbean for Visa, Mr. Cesar Cernuda, the President of Microsoft Latin America, Craig De Souza from Facebook, Josh Leibowitz from Carnival, SAP's Claudio Muruzabal, Cisco's Jordi Botifol, Ojilon Almeida from Western Union, Jeff Katz from Amazon, and today, Mr. Enrico. What a lineup of thought leaders and leading global companies. You know, we've had a lot of takeaways, not only as students, but as leadership here at the college on best practices, team building, and thought leadership from this series, so I hope you're all taking notes. Pop test at the end, so make sure you absorb everything that's happening. But let's give Mike Fernandez a big round of applause for helping us launch this series and support it, and for everything you do in the community. Thank you so much, Mike. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to hand things off to my colleague, Dr. John Wensveen. Dr. Wensveen.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Thanks for the introduction, Juan, and good morning, everybody. How is everybody today? Good morning. Happy October 1st. How many students do we have from MDC that are in the house with us today? Please raise your hand. Excellent. We've got a full house. So it's a great pleasure to have you here with us today. In a short while, there's going to be an opportunity for the guests in our audience to participate in a question and answer session to start thinking about what you'd like to ask our guest speaker. We have a full house, and I'd like to take a brief moment to welcome you to the Mike Fernandez Global Business Leadership Series featuring our special guest, Mr. Carlo Enrico, who will be introduced momentarily. I would like to thank Mr. Fernandez and family for their generous support of this important event that provides students with knowledge of best practices, leadership, and the opportunity to network with key industry influencers. Thank you to Miami-Dade College leadership, Dr. Montoya, our interim president, and Dr. Edicio, MDC's provost, and all of the other support units that we have in the house with us today. And I'd also like to thank the MDC team, faculty, staff, and board of trustees that we have represented with us here this morning. There's never been a more passionate group of individuals that are here to help support student success, and for that we're forever grateful, and thank you to the Idea Center for hosting the event today. We're in an age of mega disruption and acceleration, often referred to as the digital age, and the world around us is changing in ways that consumers pay for goods and services. What does this mean for the future of payments in the digital age? I don't have the answers, but I am sure this morning we will gain a better insight into what the future looks like. It gives me great pleasure to introduce the President of Latin America and the Caribbean at Mastercard. Carlo Enrico is President of Mastercard's Latin America and Caribbean region and a member of the company's management committee. He is responsible for leading Mastercard's strategy and operations across 45 countries and territories. I assume you have a lot of air miles, and driving transformational efforts across digital payments, financial and social inclusion, products and services. Since joining Mastercard in 2012, Carlo has served in several senior roles, including Division President for Western Europe and Division President for Central Eastern Europe. Prior to joining Mastercard, he was CEO of BancoPosta, the financial services division of Italian postal services provider Poste Italiane. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. Thumbs up. Carlo has over 15 years experience in the financial industry, holding senior roles at Banco di Sicilia, Capitalia Group, and Goldman Sachs. Ladies and gentlemen, please provide a warm MDC welcome to our guest, Carlo Enrico.
Sure. Good morning. I should say buenos dias, but I'm not there yet.
Sorry, my mother-in-law is texting me to say she sees me on TV. All right, so before we begin, I just wanted to go over a little bit of factual data for Mastercard, so correct me if anything is not correct. But what was interesting to me is I was doing a little bit of background research. I've known Mastercard for forever and grew up with the logo. And what I thought was interesting this last year is that the Mastercard name was dropped from the logo, and it's basically colors and symbols. And my understanding is the key messaging there is that the future doesn't involve credit cards per se. It's more of a digital experience, and the brand is so highly recognized. In fact, it hits one of the top 30 in the most recognized logos worldwide, and it seems to be increasing all of the time. Publicly traded financial services corporation with a worldwide portfolio, and we'll get into some of the details about the region that you oversee. Founded originally in 1966 as Interbank, and then evolved over a couple of different versions of name. From as a kid, I remember it as Master Charge, and then eventually became Mastercard in 1979. Annual revenue excess of $12.5 billion. So these are the reporting figures that I got for 2018. Annual operating income excess of $6.6 billion. Total assets of more than $21 billion. 13,000 plus employees. And what was really interesting to me, the stock value in 2006 was $39, which by the way is my lucky number, and has a stock value as of yesterday at about $271, so pretty significant growth. And I also was very interested in the careers, particularly for the students that are joining us today, and I wanted to see how many available slots there were. And globally, there are over 1,000 open positions at Mastercard, mastercard.com for those students. Look at the career section. And what was really interesting to me is that the majority of the jobs, the largest category is technology, design, and development, and there are all kinds of other career opportunities. And another thing that really captured my attention, since we're heavily involved in it here at Miami-Dade College, is cybersecurity and the Cybersecurity Talent Initiative. And I don't know if we have an opportunity to touch on that at some point in our conversation, but Mastercard is one of the corporate sponsors for a Cybersecurity Talent Initiative with a number of other partners where students have the ability to acquire up to $75,000 in student loan assistance for those pursuing career pathways in the field, which I thought was extremely exciting. So with that, buongiorno.
Buongiorno.
And I'll do my best with Italian today. And I really want to welcome you and thank you for joining us here at Miami-Dade College. I know you have an incredibly busy schedule, and we're looking forward to learning more about your career pathway and you as an individual and your related successes, and gaining some insight into the future of what the digital age looks like and where Mastercard stands in that in terms of the future. So with that, I'd like to also congratulate you on your a little over 1 year now, anniversary at Mastercard as president for Latin America and the Caribbean. And before we discuss your current role, I'd like to get a better understanding of how somebody from Italy made his way to Miami, 4,900 miles away. I'm sure there's a bit of a journey there. And if you could maybe give us a little bit of background on how you ended up here, where your career got started.
Absolutely. So first of all, I have to tell you that when I was in Bocconi, which is the university in Milano I attended, I do remember these kind of sessions, and those really remained in my brain and in my heart. So I have to congratulate with Mr. Fernandez and everyone at Miami-Dade College for this amazing initiative. So congratulations. It has been a little bit of a journey. I am Italian, I grew up in Italy, and after graduation I moved to London, where I picked up my strong British accent, right? And I spent 7 years at Goldman Sachs working in equity research and investment banking, covering the European financial institutions listed in Europe. When my first son was born, that actually showed up unexpectedly right now. I decided actually to get a balance in my life. At that time, I used to work 16, 17 hours a day, including Saturdays and Sundays. Yes, indeed. So I decided to move back to Italy. And I joined, I became a head of retail on Capitalia, which was the fourth largest banking group at that time. and then became, when I was 33, the CEO of a regional bank in the south of Italy, Banco di Sicilia, with 6,500 employees and 650 branches. Quite of an intense experience. And then I came back to Roma to run the Post Bank, which is the third largest Italian bank distributing financial services, retail products throughout 14,000 post offices across Italy. After 10 years in Italy of intense real economy and retail banking, I was really looking forward to a new opportunity in an international environment. At that time, I used to sit on the European Advisory Board of Mastercard, as I used to be, as a Poste Italiane, one of the largest issuers of cards in Europe. And I ended up joining Mastercard in 2012. I've run strategy and M&A for 3 years globally. I then decided to go back to what I like, which is managing a P&L, managing a business, managing a group of people. I managed Central Eastern Europe, which is the emerging part of Europe, before moving into Western Europe, which is a vast region within Europe that goes from the Nordics, Netherlands, Belgium, Italy, France, Spain, and Portugal, still based in London, which is the most mature and the largest part of Europe for 4 years before being promoted and being offered the opportunity to move to Miami and run Latin America. So I landed with my wife and my 4 kids exactly a year and 2 months ago, in this new adventure of which I'm very much excited so far.
So thank you for that background information. So what I'm getting out of what you're discussing is that you're not afraid to take risks. And if you look at your career progression, I'm changing the nature of my question a little bit from what I originally was going to ask you, and I'm trying to get a feeling of what motivated you to take these risks, and do you recommend to students and young people that are on the career search to take risks and the pros and cons of doing that?
Well, I must admit that somebody told me when I was younger that it's very, very important to stand out of the crowd before you are 35. I don't know if it's 30, it's 35, it's 40. It's very difficult to find roles in life. But definitely that sentence, that learning, that guidance stood in my brain for a long time. So if you think about it, the working environment is pretty competitive. And if you think about it, especially I learned today that Miami-Dade is the largest university in the US in terms of students, 150,000 plus. You individually, you are one of many. So you need to make sure that when you enter the working environment, you're not one of many anymore, but you're standing out of the crowd somehow. Could be your personality, could be your curriculum, could be your global profile, could be your summer internships, could be your passion for a specific topic. And you should make sure that you leverage that individuality, that personality, that skill that you have in the working environment in order to stand out of the crowd before a certain age. I've been told 35, I'll stick with that. So that was a little bit what drove me. Basically the ambition to make sure that I was putting under my belt experiences that were making me a better person, making me a better professional, but first of all, making me a better person, and exposing me to different languages, cultures, stakeholders, management styles, businesses. So whenever I had the opportunity to move, I jumped on it. It was not my nature. I'm the typical Italian. You stay at home, you have mom and dad, you have the perfect food, you wait to get married, and then your wife will take you out of the family, right? You don't even make the decision yourself. That's a prototype of the culture I grew up with. But life at the end of the day is a lot of luck. I'm sure you have seen the movie Sliding Doors. Life is sliding doors. When they open up, you have to decide either you go through or not. I like to say that life is 50% luck and 50% your ability to get the best out of that luck. So when the door opens, you need to be ready. You need to be ready emotionally, mentally, psychologically, financially, from a skill perspective, to cross that door and go for it. So that's what drove me, was a little bit the ambition to stand out of the crowd before being 35, a little bit the curiosity to push myself beyond my comfort zone of son of a good Italian family and test myself in a different environment, was a little bit the willingness to, to learn more that would have made me not one of many, but standing out of the crowd a little bit. And then eventually my life with my 4 kids actually became a little bit of a common denominator, right? So traveling around the world in different cities and having different experiences as a family has been, I would say, the cherry on the cake. I have 4 kids. Tommaso, that was born in London. Ludovica, born in Roma. My 3rd one born in Palermo, Sicily. My 4th one again in Roma. Then we decided to move again, but without having more kids. But it's becoming a little bit of a common denominator and a driver for our family as well, which is a nice cherry on the cake.
So in terms of risk, then do you say, or would you recommend that you take your risks early in your career or later in your career, or a combination of both?
Early in the career is very, very important, because late in your career you take risks anyway. And if you are in a certain position, you have to take decisions. You are paid to make decisions. You are paid to make risks. And you need to be an example for your organization. But learning to take risks early in your career is more difficult. So that's the challenge that I would definitely stress. Again, you need to build a background, a personality, a profile that is different from others early in your career. This is where you have to stand out of the crowd.
So in a former role, you had responsibility for Mastercard Western Europe operations, and then you moved to Miami a little over a year ago and to oversee Latin America and Caribbean. What has the experience of moving here and focusing on a completely different region been like for you and your family?
An amazing experience, actually. Again, if you want to diversify your background, you need to put different experiences under your belt. For me, this is the first experience in the US. It's the first experience as a regional president in our organization, where I'm actually responsible of an entire region, Latin America and Caribbean in this case. Definitely the first experience for me to build a global profile. So I've been working in London, Italy for global and local organizations. I've been traveling throughout Europe for 15 years, so I know Europe inside out. This is my first experience. We actually give me the opportunity to have a flavor of the US and an intense flavor of Latin America. So definitely an amazing experience. A little bit of a change for my family, especially my 2 older kids, my teenagers, because they grew up in London. They feel London is home. So for them to move to Miami was somehow impactful. Different school system, different social life, different means of transport, right? We used to use the tube. Now you're stuck in the car for most of your day. But professionally, I must admit, it has been extremely enriching. I'm learning so much. Mastercard is a global business. The payment is the same payment. The card is the same card, but there's a lot of local flavor and a lot of differences depending on how people, market structure, innovation, maturity of the market actually shape the business. So a lot of professional learnings for me. And also a tremendous family experience, because while impactful, while a big change, we feel at home somehow. I don't know why, but Italians and Latinos are same family, right? And certainly we are enjoying it very much.
Good. Well, again, welcome, and that's a great story. So getting back to you and your career, why the payments industry, and then why the move to Latin America?
So I didn't choose payments. Very honestly, after 10 years in a bank based in Sicily, which is well known for having great beaches, a great history, but also, unfortunately, for being the hometown of mafia and being pretty corrupted. So I must admit it has been professionally a very intense experience. I used to be 33, CEO of a bank with 6,000 people in Sicily with no experience in credit, and probably the largest team I've ever managed before was 12 people. So that was intense. And 6 years as CEO of Postbank, a bank that is state-owned, based in Roma, was for different reasons, under a strong political influence, a very enriching experience, but I thought that after 6 years was enough. And so my decision was to get myself and my family out of Italy in a global international environment. The opportunity I had was Mastercard because I was sitting on the advisory board. I was not excited about Mastercard at that time, admittedly. I was not excited about payments. But each and every day of my career at Mastercard has been an amazing surprise. So I'm very much in love with Mastercard. I'm very much passionate about payments, but that was, I didn't choose payments. Payments choose me, exactly as I didn't choose my wife. My wife chose me, once again. Payments in Latin America, payments on Mastercard, I think is going to be, I'm 47 today, so I've worked at Mastercard for 7 years. I'm taking a little bit of a risk. I do like taking risks. And I can tell you that most probably I will end up my career in Mastercard. And I still want to work for a long time. So I still have 13, 15 years plus of work. That tells you how much passionate and how much in love I am with my firm. It's not only the payments, it's not only the business opportunity, but it's also the culture and the purpose that Mastercard has. That's the payments. Why Latin America? Again, I don't want to say that I choose Latin America. There was an opportunity to come and replace my predecessor, who, by the way, is also my boss now. And I took it. The door was opening. To be honest, whether it was Latin America or Asia, I would have crossed it anyway. But I must admit, I've been offered Latin America because there's an obvious cultural fit, despite my Spanish being still very poor. Despite me studying every Sunday morning, 8:30 to 10:30 with a professora, despite me reading books every night to learn Spanish. I'm currently reading a book called El perro que habla no muerde. It's probably an elementary school level, but you have to start from there, right? And despite all that, I, of course, feel at home, so I haven't chosen Latin America, but I think the company has chosen it for me. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think I'm adding a lot of value by bringing in my European experience because I've been through regulation, innovation, the digital revolution in Europe that is actually happening in Latin America as we speak. So I've experienced the journey. And also, I think, as I said, culturally, I think the fit between an Italian and Latin America makes a lot of sense. I can tell you why I'm so passionate about Latin American payments together, and I think there are 2 or 3 numbers. I'm a number guy that I like mentioning. If you think of Latin America, there are 650 million people, it's around 8-9% of the global population. 80% of them live in cities. So they are highly urbanized. 30% of the population are millennials. And millennials today have a very high demand for digital. They want to have access to digital. And finally, you have 50% of the adults in Latin America without a current account. So you understand that you have an adult population underserved by banks. And if you're underserved by banks, you don't have a credit history. If you don't have a credit history, you don't have access to opportunities, business opportunities for you as an individual and for your families. So there's a lot of demand for financial inclusion, and there's a lot of demand for digital inclusion, the millennials, that wants to have the same opportunities that millennials have around the globe. So the combination of financial inclusion and digital inclusion is what makes Latin America the most promising region in payments globally. Today, Latin America is the fastest growing region for Mastercard globally. And more importantly, today Latin America is the fastest growing region in the world for e-commerce transactions because of the millennials asking clear and loud for more digital access. So that makes payments in Latin America a massive gift for my day-to-day job.
So I was detecting passion in what you do, and then you used the word passionate. So that's obvious, and that's oozing through. So what is the one thing that keeps you motivated about your current role, and is there anything that keeps you up at night that you just can't fall asleep over?
I think what excites me the most is the purpose of Mastercard in the region. One thing is to say Mastercard is fostering financial inclusion, helping mujeres and millennials around the world to get into the financial system. One thing which I used to say in Europe, one thing is to experience it every day. And this is what makes me passionate. I'm spending most of my time talking to universities, colleges, governments, business partners, CEOs of banks, fintechs, and strategize together how to really make the societies of the emerging markets in Latin America, and I would say the emerging markets of Latin America, because there are some, such as Brazil, that is not an emerging market anymore. It's a well-shaped and mature market. But how can we actually help the local society develop? How can we bring our global technology at a very convenient cost, because it's global, so the marginal cost is minuscule, for the benefit of a society? We cannot do it ourselves because we are a B2B company, so we offer technology for other businesses to bring payments in the hands of consumers, to bring payments in the hands of merchants, but we need to go through partnerships. So how we shape those partnerships for the benefit of the society is probably the most exciting component of my working life. Thanks God, because of the business opportunities, because of a great team I have, because of the great business model Mastercard has, I sleep very well at night. With some exceptions, especially when I'm on a red-eye flight, and that happens very often. But there is one thing, I don't want to call it concern, but it's one thing that keeps me always on my toes, which is my leadership role, my team. So I have 900 people, 300 here in Miami and 600 in the markets. They're watching me every day.
Right now they are. They're streamlining.
They are watching me wherever I go. But they're watching me in meetings. They're listening to me in meetings. They are reading my emails. They are watching my behavior. They feel my pressure. They feel my excitement. They see my mistakes, and they do so many mistakes every single day. So I think that the responsibility of shaping a culture in a large organization that is growing significantly, because we're hiring 100 to 200 people every single year, so we're growing at 10 to 20%. I call it my social role in the organization, which is my leadership role, is what makes me very passionate, but also a little bit nervous, because I know that my behaviors, my decision influence so many people out there. And if I influence my team will influence the newcomers in the organization, as well as my business partners. So that is something that I really focus obsessively on.
Okay. So if you look at the future of Latin America, and you've already mentioned it a little bit, but to touch on it a little bit more, where do you see the future going as it pertains to Latin America, or just the world in general? And how do you see your role fitting into that in terms of influencing change?
So there are two ways to look at the potential of the region that I usually look at. One is to look at the card business. At the end of the day, Mastercard, and thank you for mentioning our new branding strategy, we're taking Mastercard out for two reasons. One, because today in Latin America, to make an example, 25% of all our transactions are card non-present transactions, so where you don't see the card. Think of your Netflix, right? You put your card on file, you forget about it, maybe you see it in your receipt, you see it at checkout button, but you don't touch your plastic. So 25% of the cards, of the transactions are already card non-present. Not only, but the second reason why we took the Mastercard name out of the logo is because the world is going mobile. The display of your mobile can be as big as you want if you have an iPhone Plus or not, but it's limited. And the space that is dedicated on a mobile device to your brand is predetermined. So if you take the Mastercard name out, you can actually expand the two interlocking circles that hopefully all of you are very familiar with. And if you look at a mobile device and you look at the Mastercard brand, it's actually larger than many others. So that's the second reason why we did it. But I lost your question, which was, what's the future of Latin America?
Yes. Or the world in general as it relates to the industry. Yeah.
So, and I was saying I like to look at the potential in two ways. One is the card penetration. Today, 24% of all the transactions in Latin America are actually made in cards. 76% is cash. So there's still a huge cash displacement potential. The more generations use their cards, the more they use their cards on digital, the more prepaid cards are offered, the more merchants accept cards, the more the whole ecosystem is growing. And using cards is more convenient than using cash for many reasons. Certainly, using cash has a very high cost for the society. So that 24% penetration of cards compared with a 50% penetration in Europe. So not to be too sophisticated, I see that the market in Latin America can easily double. On top of that, if you add all the non-card business, and Mastercard has acquired a lot of companies, a lot of cámara de compensación, as you call them here in Latin America, around the world. So we're looking at the pie of the potential beyond simply cards. Well, then in that case, our current business is only 3% of the total pie. So I see, first of all, a lot of potential to grow in Latin America and globally. I see a lot of potential to grow in digital. And growing in digital is not growing volumes only, but it's also growing authentication, tokenization, all the fraud detection tools, everything that is global and can be offered to the global players to really make the e-commerce space more secure. There are still a lot of frauds out there in the digital space. And finally, I would say that data is going to be the big opportunity. In digital, it's so much easier to catch data, gather data, store data today costs nothing. Whoever can actually manage data properly in digital can definitely make a big difference. So I would say tremendous volume growth, cybersecurity and digital, and the big data opportunity out there are going to be the three main trends in payments going forward.
So I have another question that I'm going to ask you, but before we get there, I do want to give members of our audience here an opportunity to ask questions. So there is a microphone on the right side of the room if you're sitting facing the stage. They're pointing at it right now. It's about row 8. And if you would like to line up and you have a question you'd like to ask our guests, you're more than welcome to do that. The next question that I have for you really is about talent and skills. And would you agree that there's an emerging talent skills gap? I know there's many industries and many occupations now and for the future, but are you concerned as MasterCard and in your role that there is an emerging talent skills gap? And is there anything that you're doing as an organization to prepare for that now or in the future? And on top of that, are there things that academic institutions like Miami-Dade College can do to make sure that we're equipping the students with the right tools and resources so they are successful long term?
As I said before, these kind of meetings, for instance, are definitely a major opportunity for students to really broaden their horizons and listening to different stories and different journeys and different businesses. So maybe my recommendation here is make sure that you, as students, expose yourself to as many speakers, businesses, industries, different as possible. To my son Tommaso, I encourage to do internship. One day in a very heavy manufacturing business, one day in a very sophisticated cybersecurity house, one day in a consulting firm. And I'm very proud that actually he started cleaning up shelves in a warehouse a couple of years ago as a summer internship. Talent skills, it's a very difficult question. And probably the world is changing so fast that whatever I say, I said it before, I'm reluctant to provide rules because the society and the working environment is changing so much. So my recommendation would be to think the future as something that is changing so fast that we have no idea, so we cannot project the past growth or the past change rate into the future. Probably being flexible, versatile, adaptable is going to be a key skill. Back in the day, if I think of my father's generation, probably you had one career, probably maximum two, staying in the same job or role for maybe 15, 20 years and maybe changing once in your life from a company to another. I think the world is changing so fast. The need of governments to have their pensions paid is so big that probably we will be asked to work more. Probably individuals will have a healthier diet and a healthier life, and the life expectation will expand, so probably you will be working for longer, whether you like it or not. So if the world is changing, you're going to be working more. Probably you're going to have not one or two careers, but probably you're going to have 3 to 5 careers or maybe more. So I think that think broadly, having different skills, being adaptable, being versatile, exposing yourself from when you are young to different environments, probably that would be my key learning.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. I really appreciate that. So we have a few people lined up for questions. If you could just state your name and your affiliation, that would be terrific. Thank you.
Good morning, Jose Agurto. I'm a bachelor student here at Miami-Dade, retired Marine. Before the Marine Corps, I worked for Credomatic. Pretty sure you're familiar with them in Latin America. And the biggest issue we had back then in '97 when I out of high school started working with them was the chargebacks. And obviously that's one of the biggest things that I think the credit card industry challenged and spent a lot of money on, trying to verify the transaction, the legitimacy and the intent of the person doing that. And also I saw that Mastercard just started with Apple and cut the banks out of the middle. So what is the future of dealing with the chargebacks now that everything is digital? Before they used to have the card present, now the card is not present. They used to have the copy of the card to send it back to the processors. Are they looking into working directly with companies and getting their accessibility to Mastercard? And how are you guys planning to do the security with the chargebacks?
Thank you. That's a very technical question. I'm going to try to simplify. Yes. Me and you can have a conversation afterwards about chargebacks and Credomatic that I'm a big fan of. It's a great company. Yes. But let me try and simplify. First of all, I have to correct, if I may, what you said. We're not cutting banks by partnering with Apple. Okay. So let me explain. Okay. Apple has launched a card called Apple Card, which is a pretty cool product, by the way, where there is, as always, an issuer behind. An issuer is basically a bank that is issuing the plastic and providing the credit. Apple is not a bank. Yes. Apple cannot give you credit. So there always need to be a bank in the middle. That bank is, by coincidence, Goldman Sachs, where I used to work for.
Okay.
So I'm very happy, actually. I'm very proud of that product because you have Mastercard, Goldman Sachs, and Apple, which is my preferred phone. I shouldn't say so, but it is.
It's mine too.
It's not product placement. So Mastercard is heavily dependent on banks because this is our go-to-market. This is our way to partner up. Mastercard has been created as a cost center by the American banks that decided to pull together the payment back offices, creating an association, a consortium, 50 years ago, you said? 1966, right? So 53 years ago. That back office then became an independent company, merged with a European entity and became global. So we never, ever cut banks out. And we gave always banks a role and skin in the game by definition. But yes, of course, many banks are seeing disintermediation. Many banks seeing Apple owning the consumer experience. Many banks see the fintechs that are popping up everywhere, globally, and especially in Latin America. You know, the new bank is in Brazil is the single largest fintech in the world. So in Latin America, there's a lot of fintech growing up, and potentially disintermediating banks, but we never do. That's a message I want to get. The second is chargebacks. What is a chargeback? Is basically a mechanism through which, you know what Mastercard does, right? So we switch transaction. We allow a merchant to see if Carlo has enough money on his account to pay for those $7.50 Frappuccino at Starbucks, right? That's what we do. So if there is a dispute, or if the transaction is not clean, or if there is a potential fraud, or if the consumer says, I haven't done that transaction, there's a long series of reasons, then the transaction is charged back where it has been actually paid from. So I'm not going to entertain a workshop on chargebacks, but it's a very good question. Chargebacks is a very cumbersome part of the process. It's it's very expensive. It's a pain point. However, chargebacks allow a much better service. All the Cámara de Compensación, all the ACH, all the alternative payment methods in the world would love to have chargebacks, because it's a way really to have a dispute resolution between the issuer and the acquirer, so the issuer that issued the card and the acquirer that manages the POS at the retailer, to have a fair resolution of any dispute, of any fraud. So it's very, very important. Needs to be better, needs to be seamless, needs to be cheaper. That's why we made an acquisition 6 months ago of a company called Etoca. And actually, I'm very happy to say that Etoca and Credomatic, which is your ex-company, have actually made a very important strategic agreement in Central America to streamline the chargebacks in Central America.
Awesome. Thank you, sir.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Professor James, and I'm a business professor. I want to take the opportunity to thank you for having the opportunity for our students and faculty to listen to your insight about the industry. My question is not a technical question, it's more like a managerial question, right? What is your thought process? How do you deal with adversity when things don't go your way, which it can be sometimes frustrating for a lot of managers, right? So can you walk us through, like, how do you deal when things don't go your way, your setbacks and stuff like that?
I think I've learned a lot from my experience in Banco di Sicilia. When I was 33, I was very young. Everything was adversity to me. I was absolutely inappropriate for that role. I was not equipped enough, but the CEO of the group believed in me, gave me the chance, the doors open, and I went through. So I've learned by doing. And I think everyone has its own attitude, its own personality, and has to do with adversity in its own way. So there's not a checklist of things that you need to do when you are in trouble. My checklist, it's my very own one, is, first of all, I always put the corporate interest before me. When you have a key decision to take in a business and you think not as an individual, not at my own return or risk profile, if I get it right or wrong, but if you think about the company, so much easier in each and every circumstance. The second very simple lesson for me is do your homework. You have a problem, you have to deal with it, you need to know everything around it. You need to know your numbers, you need to ask for help, you need to pull people around the table that know more about that issue than you. You need to pick different ideas. You need to end up the meeting asking the question, what am I missing? Where am I wrong? Is there anyone around the table that thinks differently? Then you are acting in the interest of the company. Then you own the topic and you have done everything you could to really understand it and own it. And you have asked for help, collecting people around the table to help you sorting it out. Most of the cases you get it right. In some cases you get it wrong. But if statistically you get it right 51% of the times, is good enough.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. I think we have time for two more, so please go ahead.
So my name is Anthony Bueno. I used to work at Dave & Buster's. I was a technician there doing all the network. My question is, for security purposes, what is the statistic of frauds for a debit card or any sort of transactions through your system?
That's a very good question. I need to take a few more minutes for that. While I celebrated Latin America for being the fastest growing region globally in payments and in particular in e-commerce, Latin America is lagging behind in a very significant way in fraud management and approval rates. So what is fraud management? Fraud is when your card is compromised, your card is attacked by a fraudster, when your card is cloned, when you are individually phished, and your card credentials are used in a fraudulent way. The fraud levels are very, very high in Latin America. They are 4 times higher than the global average. So it's a big problem. I'm talking about, card non-present. So I'm talking about when your card is used in e-commerce. Card present, there's no problems anymore. You have your chip on the card, you have your PIN in most places. If not, you have your signature. But with the chip, all your information are encrypted, are secure, so there's no fraud anymore, very little. It's less than 1 basis point of frauds in the card present environment when you go in store. The problem is in card non-present, the 25% of all the transactions we see. This is where Latin America has fraud rates which are too high. Who's paying the frauds? Most of the times the issuer, most of the time, not always. So what does the issuer, the bank that gave you the card, the bank that gave you the credit do if they're losing money for frauds? They become stringent, they become very cautious on their approval rates. Before saying yes to a transaction, they will triple check. This is where they're starting using the cybersecurity fraud detection tools that I said before. This is where the banks start using the data, the big data that I said before. Using tools, using data, they know that, John, your transaction is good. I'm going to approve it. Carlo, your transaction, there's something that does not resonate with me. I'm going to decline. Unfortunately, the decline rate, given the fact that the frauds are high, also the decline rates in Latin America are pretty high. Usually 1 out of 3 times that you try to use your card online in Latin America is actually declined. It's not good, not good enough. So we need to make sure that the e-commerce space actually becomes more secure, first of all.
Right.
Tokenization, authentication, global solutions and technology that we provide and are consolidated globally, but also that becomes more consumer friendly. Think about the millennial I said before. that is looking for access to digital like any other millennial around the world. And to get an account, in most cases, you need to have a card. So he's trying his first card, and his card gets declined. That's an awful consumer experience. So we have more room to do. We have more work to do in that area. I'm very happy to see that our model, the card-based model, and our brand, Mastercard in particular, is recognized for being the best and the most secure way to make payments, but is not enough. So there is much more work to do in fraud management and approval rates to give a better consumer experience to millennials.
Well, thank you for your time. It's a great experience here listening to all of this. It's super inspiring, so thank you.
Thank you.
So that statistic blows me away about the decline rate, and I'd be curious how that impacts the flow of the economy, positively or negatively. That's probably a much deeper question to explore, but that's very fascinating. So we have time for one more question from the audience. So please go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Milagros, and I have a question, maybe your thought regarding the comment that you made earlier about the banks are still part of the business model. Nevertheless, Mastercard decided to take their name off the card. Likewise, the banks are looking more at possibly also becoming invisible to the consumer. Do you see this as a trend going forward as far as how the brands are going to be playing in this space with fintechs? Or is this just something that needs to happen in an ad hoc basis to get a product out? What are your thoughts on that?
It's a very good question, and it's a very difficult one because it's not only how the brands are displayed on a card, and it's not really only how their brand look like. But the big question out there, I think, is how the brands will be experienced and displayed in digital. Who's going to own the consumer experience, and who's going to become a B2B provider, especially technological providers such as ourselves? Which brands are going to survive in digital? It's so easy to disappear in digital. Selfishly, for Mastercard, it's very simple. The Mastercard brand is not what drives the consumer engagement. It's not what drives the consumer experience, because we are a B2B enabler. We enable banks for them to package and offer to consumers. So our brand needs to be there. Everyone wants to have our brands there because it's a trusted brand. We are the trusted middlemen that make the transaction flowing seamlessly throughout the world. So you want to make that statement that I'm not managing my money myself on carloenrico.com, but there's somebody trusted out there with a 99% brand awareness, with the best of breed of the global solutions that have been doing this for 53 years, that will take care of your payment. So everyone wants our brand there. But the same question applied to many other businesses is a more difficult one. How many brands will continue to survive, and how will they combine in that small device that is the mobile phone display? And this is going to be a more competitive landscape. This is going to be a competition of the value you provide, the importance of your brand, what your brand promises, and what is the importance for your brand to be there. On one extreme, you have the Mastercard. I told you, I think you need to have it there. Even Apple, that is very well known for building their own proprietary ecosystems, wanted our brand to make the statement of being global, interoperable, safe, seamless, but not necessarily for other businesses.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you for your question. So what I'd like to do to conclude is I'd like to give you an opportunity for a parting thought. And if you could give one piece of advice about anything, particularly focused on our students, what would it be?
That was not scheduled.
No.
I have to make it up. It took me a long time to find the right balance between who I am and the role I cover in a company. Meaning that growing, you change, and growing in an organization, depending on the role you have, you change as a person. I've learned only recently to really be fully authentic in my working environment, with my convictions, with my bad character and attitude sometimes, hopefully with my natural passion for what I do every day. Vulnerable. When you are a leader and you have to address a group of people, I was hiding, especially back in the day when I was younger, I was hiding my vulnerabilities or try to hide them. People watch at you, they know them. Just live with them. So I think the key message here is just be authentic, be yourself, and if you are yourself, if you are self-aware, you know your weaknesses and your strengths, you're gonna blossom because you're gonna leverage your strengths, you're gonna try and mitigate your weaknesses. So I think that be self-aware and be authentic is a learning that I've been through, and I want to pass on to the students.
Well, that's great advice, and with that, I'd like to conclude and say a very special thank you on behalf of Miami-Dade College and everybody here today for joining us out of your busy schedule and providing more insight into what the future looks like and sharing your career history and providing the great advice that you did. So it's very welcoming, and if there's anything we can ever do to help support you as a college, please do not hesitate to reach out. And again, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.